In this video, we're going to talk about what the best and most efficient exercises are for drug-free lifters to build great physique. So we live in the era of internet fitness where people think squats and deadlifts are bad exercises because they don't isolate a single muscle group. So this video is very much due. But before we get into the exact exercises, I want to quickly cover what makes a good exercise. So a good exercise is one that is easy to progressively overload, one that you can train heavy, and one that works a lot of muscle in the body. And so within this category of the big basic compound exercises, it's also important to pick exercises that you can train intensely for a long time, that work well for you, and that you have some enjoyment for. The biggest load of bullshit by far that I see in today's fitness industry is people talking about how the basic compound lifts don't isolate any single muscle group and are therefore ineffective for building muscle. And this just goes to show how many people are brainwashed by bodybuilding culture and by the fitness industry. And it's true. When you're on steroids, you don't need big exercises like squats and deadlifts. You can just focus on isolating each muscle group, treating your body as individual parts, and pumping tons of sets and reps with light weights essentially. When you're drug free, you need big exercises like squats and deadlifts that overload and force your entire body to work as one whole unit to build muscle, because when you're a natural lifter, your body grows as a whole. It grows as one whole unit. You will get absolutely nowhere by attempting to build yourself up using isolation exercises, which are essentially tools of detail and not tools of substance, which are the big basic compound lifts. Leg extensions don't build big legs, and chest flies won't build a big chest. The way you have to see this is to look at your exercises and your physique like a cake. The cake is the big heavy compound lifts that are going to produce the substance of your physique, and the isolation exercises are the icing on top of the cake. It's the detail work. Prioritizing isolation work over big compound lifts is equivalent to trying to add icing on top of the cake before the cake has been baked, and this is what most guys in the gym are doing nowadays thanks to the fitness industry. If instead of treating your physique as individual parts, you just focused almost exclusively on just getting stronger and stronger at a handful of basic compound exercises like squats, deadlifts, bench presses, overhead presses, weighted chin-ups, rows, dips, you would not lack muscle and strength. In fact, if everyone approached their training like this, everyone would have an incredibly well-developed physique. There would not be a lack of muscle and strength. But walk into any public gym and you'll see guys all over the place who can't even squat their own body weight for 5 reps, who are using concentration curls, tons of different isolation exercises and machines to build up their physique. When I was traveling, I've been traveling for the past 2 months, and I've been to tons of different public gyms, and this is the number one thing I see. The first thing they do in their workout, they go up to the concentration curl, they start pumping out some reps, right? They start going to the pec deck machine, doing some leg extensions. Not once did I see anybody go to the squat rack. Not once did I see anybody using a fucking barbell. Literally, I did not see anyone doing any sort of basic exercises, and it showed throughout the entire gym. Every gym I went to, no one was doing any of the basic exercises, and everybody lacked muscle and strength as a result. In fact, there's a funny story. When I went to this one gym in Portugal, I was hitting some squats, I was hitting some weighted chin-ups, and there's this really skinny guy working out right next to me, and he starts, like, he's one of those guys, the first thing he did in his workout, he goes up to the bench and starts pumping out some concentration curls. And this guy is a toothpick, with all due respect. He's very, very skinny, right? And he's watching me push fucking intensely on some squats and weighted chin-ups, like pushing close to failure, training really hard with some heavy weights. And this kid is just fucking mesmerized. He's like questioning his entire existence right now. He's like, what in the fuck am I doing right now? Almost guarantee after I left, he started pumping out some squats and some weighted chin-ups. And I just see these people all over the place, just misinformed, just performing bodybuilding bullshit splits, attempting to build themselves up with tools of detail instead of the actual basics that are going to produce the substance of their physiques. I see this all too often, and this is responsible for the lack of physique development in natural lifters. We find ourselves in the funny situation in the fitness industry where the majority of the people are training how the minority of people should. Isn't that fucking hilarious? Where the majority of the people are actual just normal people with average genetics who don't want to take drugs. You know, they're training how the minority of people should be training, which are steroid users. And this is the overwhelming problem in the fitness industry, is everyone's trying to mimic these steroid using approaches where guys can just build up their physiques through can almost build up their physiques through isolating each muscle group and treating their physiques like Legos, like individual parts. And this is never going to work for a natural lifter. Most guys just want some pecs and some biceps, and I get it. And it makes sense that you would just throw some targeted work at these muscle groups that you want developed and hope for an aesthetic physique. But that's not how you're going to develop an aesthetic physique naturally. That's not how you're going to build a nice upper body. In fact, at the beginning of my fitness journey, I've said this so many times, man, I would focus on upper body work. I'd focus on just upper body fluff. But it's not until I started focusing on the squats and deadlifts deadlifts, the movements that create a big metabolic effect throughout your entire body, that force your body to work as one whole unit to build muscle. It wasn't until then that I actually started to see the development on my physique, and it's because I was treating my body as individual parts. I was using tools of detail, isolation work, instead of treating my physique as one whole unit and training the exercises that would train my body as one whole unit. If you want to add a couple inches to your arms or pack on serious muscle to your chest or shoulders, you need to bet on having to add 30 pounds of scale weight, 30 pounds onto your physique. And do you think that's going to happen by focusing on arm work? Of course not. You need to focus on getting your body growing as one unit. You need to focus on building the big muscular structures of your body, like your legs, your back, your upper body pushing structure. And funny enough, 2/3 of your body's musculature is literally your legs and your back. Building a great physique is not about individually hitting every bit and piece of your physique to ensure complete and balanced development. It's only when you start to apply yourself to getting stronger and stronger in a handful of basic exercises that you will get muscular all around, and even the smaller areas of your physique will come up along with it. So focus on building the substance before the detail, and once you're big and strong, you can focus on fixing the minor imbalances that might have developed on your physique. But until then, everything is a weak point. Everything is imbalanced because you simply don't have any substance. You don't have any real muscle on your physique. Also remember that size and strength cannot be separated when you're a drug-free lifter. So it's quite literally impossible to become very strong throughout a handful of basic exercises without having the muscle development to go along with it. If you're lifting Mickey Mouse poundages, you're going to have a Mickey Mouse physique. So the focus always has to be working up to moving the impressive weights across the handful of basic movements, and only then will you have the physique you desire, will you have the muscle development you want. It's really that simple. The big basic movements are also just fucking hard and grueling, which is why most people don't want to do them, but it's for this reason that they are the most effective exercises you could be doing in the gym. They're the most time proven and tested exercises that you could be doing that have added more muscle to more physiques than any other set of exercises. And if I wanted to just sit here and bullshit you guys and get some views, then I would probably try and promote some new exercises or some fucking fads and gimmicks. But since I care about serving you guys at the highest level and actually getting you guys results, I promote the time-tested basic exercises. The main point is just that guys place way too much emphasis on cutting and shaping before any real muscle mass is built. And muscle mass is not built with isolation exercises and tools of detail, but rather with the big substance builders, the big compound exercises. You need a sustained heavy dose of straining under big major compound lifts in order to build any serious muscle as a drug-free lifter. I'm sorry to tell you guys that perfectly symmetrical and proportioned skin and bones don't look too impressive. And if you concern yourself with the detail work too soon, like most young guys do, and like all the dudes that I saw when I was traveling in the public gyms, then you will never be able to apply the effort, focus, and have the recovery ability to get muscular in the first place. The biggest deficiency in every trainee is not proportion or symmetry, it's simple muscle and strength. And based on the way most guys are arranging and prioritizing their training, the last thing they will ever develop is lots of muscle and strength. Thin arms, narrow shoulders, shallow chests, frail backs, and skinny legs don't need specialization programs. Always keep in mind that the gains you make in the big muscular structures of your body are going to act as the engine for the gains you're going to be able to make in the smaller muscle groups of your body, because the body grows as one whole unit, and this is a completely lost concept in today's fitness industry because of bodybuilding culture. So if you're someone who's worried about proportion and symmetry, understand that just by applying yourself to building the big muscular structures such as your legs, your back, your upper body pushing structure, naturally the smaller muscle groups on your physique are going to be coming up with those. So now I want to talk a little bit about what the best exercises are and go a little bit more into depth on each one, as well as provide you guys some strength targets to shoot for in order to produce a well-developed physique naturally. So the first exercise, of course, is the squat. And provided that you can perform the squat productively and you don't have any physical limitations or injuries holding you back, in my personal opinion, the squat should be a mandatory exercise for every drug-free lifter. There's literally no exercise that has done more for my physique development than squatting. And one of my biggest regrets is that at the beginning of my fitness journey, for the first couple of years, I didn't squat at all. In fact, I trained plenty of great exercises, but it's not until I introduced intensive squatting once a week that my physique started to develop rapidly. I believe the squat is bar none the most productive exercise that you could be doing in the gym. And really, when introduced, it has the ability to take a shit program and turn it into a very effective one. That speaks volumes. And back in the pre-steroid era of fitness, when physiques were much more a product of sound fitness practices rather than drug abuse, people worshipped the squat. It was looked at as the king of all exercise. If you think of guys like Reg Park, Steve Reeves, they literally swore by the squat. If you wanted wanted to have a great physique, a well-developed physique, you had no business not squatting. In fact, they didn't even call it the squat. They called it the growing exercise. The reason why the squat is so effective isn't limited to its ability to pack on muscle to your legs. It has much more to do with the anabolic growth effect that it creates throughout your entire body. The squat will literally pack shitloads of muscle onto your physique from head to toe. It's that effective. One of the most important training related goals that you should have as a natural lifter is to master the squat, because once you've mastered the squat and you're able to handle impressive weights on it, the muscle and strength you will have developed as a result of mastering it will translate into every other lift that you do. The muscle and strength you'll have gained will translate into your ability to lift more weight on your upper body lifts, for example, and therefore creating a more built upper body. So mastering the squat and then consistently squatting intensively on a consistent basis is a linchpin of successful drug-free physique building. If you are able to handle heavy weights in the squat, it generally follows that the rest of your body will be proportionally developed. And from my personal experience, you can work as hard as you want on all of the other exercises, but if you don't work hard on squats and deadlifts, you'll find it hard to gain in those other exercises. If you're not focused on developing your legs and training the big basic movements that work your body as one whole unit, you will find it very hard to gain strength in those other muscle groups and in those movements. As I said, that was my personal experience at the beginning of my journey. I would train all exercises except squats and deadlifts, screw off on legs, and I found it hard to develop my physique and gain much, if any, strength in those other lifts. It's a very rare case that you'd be able to squat 400 plus pounds or double your body weight for reps and not have a substantial amount of upper body muscle mass. And while some people have better leverages than others when it comes to squatting, most people, when they learn proper technique, can obtain massive benefits from the squat. They just need to spend a bit of time learning the proper form and not giving up so easily on the exercise just because it's hard or just because it feels weird at first. You have to put in the time to master the technique and do, maybe some flexibility work if you're not flexible enough to perform the exercise yet. But I'm telling you, it is worth it. Like, one of the most important goals, you have to master the fucking squat, guys. If you seriously cannot squat and you've done everything necessary to try and squat, you've learned proper technique, you've done some flexibility work, and you still find that you just can't obtain many benefits out of it, you're structurally not built for it, or if you have to work around injuries, then my best alternative is the trap bar deadlift. So I absolutely love the trap bar deadlift, and it is just as, if not more productive than the squat for a lot of people, especially if you have the kind of build that's typically more lanky, taller, and more built to deadlift rather than squat. Trap bar deadlift should be your primary focus. It's an incredible exercise. I recommend, if you can, try and use the low bar handles, but that exercise is incredible. The next exercise is the deadlift, and a lot of what I said regarding the squat and its anabolic effects on the body can also be applied to the deadlift. So the squat and the deadlift are the two best full body exercises in the universe that will place more muscle on your physique than anything else. The deadlift, despite what a lot of people are saying nowadays about, the deadlift doesn't isolate any single muscle group, it's not a good muscle building exercise, the fatigue and all of that, despite what all these people say, the deadlift is actually one of, if not the best muscle builder on the fucking planet. The deadlift is potentially the best muscle building exercise just because of the sheer muscle mass that it works. And it's funny, a lot of people will agree that the squat will put a lot of muscle mass on your body, but one time they actually did a comparing test where they compared the squat only group to a deadlift only group, and they found that the deadlift only group actually gained more muscle, which is insane. The deadlift is really the king of thickness exercises, and it gives you a really strong and powerful looking physique. And a lot of guys, they look good from the front, but from the side, they basically disappear. And the deadlift is basically going to ensure that from a back angle and from a side angle, you actually look like you lift. You have a more thick appearance. It's really going to thicken up the forearms, the traps, the erectors, the glutes, basically all the muscles responsible for a very powerful and strong looking physique. So I think deadlifting is one of the most important exercises that you need to include in your program. The only potential downside with the deadlift is on the recovery side of things. It's probably the most taxing exercise in the universe, and it's very easy to overtrain yourself with the deadlift. So I've always found that 1 to 2 sets is all you need. You cannot do more than 2 sets if you're training hard on the deadlift without overtraining yourself. Like, I basically just stick to 1 hard set now. So next is the bench press and dips, and I'm not going to need to spend much time convincing you that the bench press or dips is a great exercise, but nevertheless, I use these interchangeably because for some guys, especially taller, lankier guys, are more suited to dips, and they'll get way more out of dips than the bench press. And for shorter, stockier guys, they'll get more out of the bench press. And if you have issues with dips like a lot of people do, I would argue that probably no exercise has caused more shoulder problems than dips, so you have to be extremely careful with them. Me personally, whenever I get up to moving any considerable weight in the dip, I find that my sternum acts up. I get a lot of shooting pain. Like I feel like my chest is kind of ripping apart when I do dips. I found a little bit of a trick to kind of combat this, but nevertheless, I can't go too heavy on dips, so I prefer sticking more to the bench press. That's why I use these interchangeably, because a lot of people are going to struggle with dips. But if you can do dips, you have to exploit them to their fullest. So they've long been called the upper body squat, which is a very tall order, but I believe that it lives up to it. So I think the dip is almost superior to the bench press when it can be performed productively, just out of, again, the sheer amount of muscle mass that it works. All in all though, bench press and dips will work more muscle in your upper body than pretty much any other exercise. So it's super essential to be prioritizing either the bench press or dips. You know, you can change them from cycle to cycle if you have the ability to perform both. But nevertheless, no exercise is going to fill out your chest, triceps, and front delts as much as dips and the bench press. So next is the standing overhead press. And if you guys have been following me for any length of time, then you know I'm a big fan of overhead pressing, and I believe it is mandatory. And in recent years, I've seen a lot of guys start to promote the fact that you don't need overhead pressing to build jacked shoulders. You can focus on bench pressing and chest work, and then you can just throw in some lateral raises and some rear delt flies, and that will take care of your shoulder development. But from my experience, this has never been the case. In fact, I put this to the test. I took out any heavy overhead pressing out of my routine, and I just focused on bench pressing, lateral raises, and rear delt flies, and my shoulders got considerably smaller. And so a lot of guys prioritize bench pressing and chest work, but their shoulders end up lagging behind, and they end up developing this weird look where they basically have big ass tits. It's kind of more of a feminine look, because in my personal opinion, I really like the look where the shoulders are very much in proportion to the chest. You can't have that kind of out, like that imbalanced look where the tits are just popping out and you have flat shoulders. It's a terrible, terrible look. And the only way to combat that is to prioritize overhead pressing. So I've always prioritized it throughout my entire training career. Of course, when I tested taking it out of my routine, it did not go well. I lost a lot of shoulder size. So the standing overhead press is a mandatory movement. I use it in all of my programs, and it's really going to develop those bolder shoulders, which are, again, in my opinion, crucial to a well-developed physique. You cannot slack off on the overhead pressing. So the next most important exercise is weighted chin-ups or pull-ups. And so weighted chin-ups and pull-ups are going to develop the living shit out of your lats and your biceps, and of course your upper back. So this has also always been a staple in my routines, and it's going to be responsible for that width, that broad shoulder appearance, and that kind of V-taper that women are literally programmed to find attractive. So you always have to prioritize weighted chin-ups or weighted pull-ups. You will not get that same width from rows. Rows are also very, very important though. So the next exercise, of course, is going to be rows. And without rows, you won't get that same thickness. You'll be able to get that width, but then again, if someone's looking at you from the back, they're just going to see the width. You're not going to have that same detail in your back. So it's very important to prioritize rows. And I'm a fan of most rowing exercises. I don't think there are really any rows that are bad exercises. I like even some of the machine rows, like the back supported ones. I like croc rows, I like Pendlay rows, I like bent over rows, incline dumbbell rows. They're all incredible exercises. So in order to get that thickness, that detail, you need to be also prioritizing rows in your back training, along with the weighted chin-ups and the weighted pull-ups. Chins and pulls are going to take care of the width and the biceps and a little bit of upper back, but then the rows are really going to finish things off and develop that thickness and that detail in your back. So do not slack off on rows. Rows are also really important because they're going to carry over into literally every other core exercise. So your squat, your deadlift, your bench press, and even your overhead press will benefit and become stronger as a result of you getting strong at rows. You know, for example, with the squat, it's going to help build your traps and it's going to build that shelf where you put the bar. With deadlifts, it's going to help you stay tighter. With the overhead press, same thing, it's going to help you stay tighter. And on the bench press, it helps to have a thick back because it keeps you more stable on the bench. So rows, very, very crucial movement. If you work up to high levels of strength across all of these core, big, basic compound lifts, you will have an incredibly well-developed physique. And once you hit the advanced strength targets, then you'll have a solid base of muscle and strength. And then you could start to worry about the detail and the proportion and the symmetry. Up until then, everything is a weak point. You need to focus on getting up to that advanced strength standard. And that's when you're gonna have the muscle development to go along with your strength. And you're gonna have a very well-developed physique. And it's very rare that if you become strong at all of these core exercises, that you'll have much, if any, lagging muscle groups. And if you do, simply throw in some isolation work for it, no big deal. But the point is, until you built up to high levels of strength across these lifts, everything is a weak point and you have not yet built any substance across your physique. So while you should always focus on and prioritize the big basic compound movements, not all of these exercises are going to suit you well structurally, or maybe you have injuries that stop you from being able to train these exercises productively. And in that case, it's going to be better to find alternatives that you can train more intensely and that work well for you. Because the number one rule for any exercise is that it does you no harm. I'm a big fan of the conventional versions of all of these exercises, and I recommend that if you can train them, then you do your utmost to train them productively. But if there are some exercises here that, as I said, don't suit you structurally, or maybe you have injuries you need to work around, then that's fine. You can pick close alternatives. What matters most is that first you're training big basic movements and that you're hitting on all the major movement patterns. So it's essential that you have a squat, a hip hinge, a horizontal push and pull, and a vertical push and pull. But really, first and foremost, you need to pick exercises that, again, you can progressively overload, that you can train intensely, and that you can do for a long time. And if there are exercises that cause you pain or you're not structurally suited to, you'd be better off finding an alternative to those. And you don't need to be dogmatic, but what's really important is that you're hitting on those movement patterns and that you're training exercises that you can train intensely and that allow you to progressively overload over time. So do not get it twisted. I do believe that isolation exercises have their place in your training and are actually quite important, but as a drug-free lifter, you have to use them sparingly and understand that they are the passenger relative to the main driver of growth, which is going to be your strength gain on the major compound lifts. Generally speaking, isolation exercises distract you from what you need to focus on if you want a muscular physique. As a natural lifter, your recovery ability is limited, so you have to allocate your limited resources to gaining strength on your main compound lifts. And too many guys use isolation exercises to their detriment, where they eat into their recovery ability and their ability to gain strength on their main compound lifts that are actually going to produce the physique development that they're after. Remember, no drug-free lifter built a respectable physique by continuously grinding away at isolation exercises. Isolation exercises are meant to plug the gaps left by the core compound movements. If you have not yet built up to high levels of strength on a handful of basic movements and you don't have the muscle development to go along with it, you have nothing to chisel. And remember, Arnold once said, you can't chisel a pebble, and he's right. Once you're big and strong and you have good overall development, then you can start to worry about the proportion and the symmetry and fixing any minor imbalances that might have developed. But regardless, here's some important accessory work that you're going to need to do in order to develop your physique to the max. So the first thing you're going to need is some neck work. So some neck curls are going to be important, some lateral raises and rear delt flies, maybe some direct work through bicep curls and some tricep extensions. You can do maybe some forearm work if you need it, some calf work, some core work through ab wheel rollouts, hanging leg raises, and maybe even some extra hamstring work through hamstring curls. Or if you have other imbalances that have developed and you're already generally strong and developed, then you can throw in some work for that muscle group as well. However, remember that you're not going to be able to do all of these in every program. So you're going to need to swap some out. I like to go based on what I feel is lagging behind the rest of the muscle groups, and that's where I allocate some work for isolation movements. And understand that you should never allocate much work to this at all. Like 2 sets once a week for each of these movements is fine. And again, remember, not all of these are going to be used in the same program, in the same routine. Go based off of what you feel is lagging behind, and then place a little bit of work there, and then go by what you feel is lagging over time. The most important thing to remember though is that you should never get so caught up in this work that it eats into your recovery ability and your ability to actually gain strength and gain muscle through your basic compound lifts. Never stray away from the basics through trying to focus on the detail. Continue to build the substance, continue to focus on the basic compound movements, and that's what's always going to produce the physique development you're after. As I said, the isolation movements are just meant to plug the gaps left by the core compound movements. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed this. Pick up my free 13-point natural muscle building checklist that covers the 13 fundamental principles of drug-free physique building. You will not want to miss out on that. I'll send it to you in your inbox for free. So we'll talk soon. Peace.